was born in Norway. Her family lived over there. And her mother's sister lived in Ihlen. And she and her husband had gone to Norway to visit. And my mother came back with them. And she was, I think, about 16 years old. And she stayed here and was working for different people. And then she married Dad.
How did she meet Dad?
Well, in a little town like Ihlen, you couldn't help but run into him.
Yeah.
Well, she got her finger caught in the meat grinder, I guess. And nobody had, I don't know if he had a car or if he took her to the doctor down in Jasper with a horse and buggy. And that's how they met.
Wow.
So, and they were married when she was 19 years old. And where did they live first? Oh, they lived on the farm. My Grandpa Wilson had cancer. He died on his birthday. And he was just, I think, 52 years old or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mother and Dad lived over on the Wilson farm. And Ann, my sister Ann, and Florence, my brother Jim were all born there. And then Dad went into Ihlen because he was going to, he purchased the hardware store there, or ran it. And
what was it called?
Just hardware store.
Just the hardware store.
We didn't have fancy names.
Matt Wilson hardware.
I don't know. I wasn't even born yet, so I don't know. And so they lived there, and Uncle Martin and Dad's brother was on the farm with Grandma. And so May was born in the rooms behind the hardware store, connected to it. And then before I was born, they built a house just south of the bridge in Ihlen. And they moved in there the day before I was born. And we lived there until Mother and I went over to Norway when I was 5 years old. I wasn't in school, so I suppose she took me along with her because they didn't have babysitters back then. And we were over there for about 9 months, I think. And went by boat and came back by boat. And I remember being awfully sick on the way home. And I could still see that nice big nest of fruit by my bed, and I was so sick I couldn't look at it. And Dad jumped overboard, but I never remembered if they saved him or not. He evidently did it on purpose. But, and then Christine was born. That was in 1922 when we went over there. And she was born in 1924. And then Mother died.
Tell me what you remember about your mother.
I remember that she sat and she did so much sewing. She made all of our clothes and everything, and a lot of it by hand. And the last I remember of her, she was pregnant with my youngest sister, Christine. And she'd be sitting in her chair and working, and the two older girls, Anne and Florence, were doing quite a little of the housework. And she had a leg problem or something. And that's when she died, when she was in the hospital and had Christine.
She died from childbirth?
Well, she had a blood clot in her leg that went to her heart, of course. And so Christine, she told Dad not to come up and visit her that day because she would be going home the next day. All of the mothers had to stay 10 days when they had a baby. And then she passed away that day. So she didn't get home to us.
Yeah. What do you remember about your father?
Oh, he was very religious, and he's hardworking, but he had ulcers and really had a lot of trouble. And so every time he'd have to go out and do the milking or something, he'd be so sick he'd vomit and sit under a tree, and then after a while he'd get up and go and do some more work. And we got him to the doctor, and he was sent up to the University of Minnesota, and they removed 3/4 of his stomach. And after that way, he was pretty good, and that lasted quite a while for him.
Did you go to a schoolhouse for school? Or?
Oh, yes. They had 3 schoolhouses in Ihlen. They had over 100 kids there going to school. And they had 2 houses where now they have a play field there for the kids. And I think they had 1st and 2nd grade in one house, and 3rd and 4th and 5th. Maybe they had 3 grades in each one. Then across the street they had another schoolhouse, and they had 7th and 8th grade in there. So they had 3 teachers and over 100 kids going to school there. Kids would sometimes go home with me, and Grandma always had something good that she baked. We'd have some lunch and play a little bit.
What kind of subjects did they teach in school?
Everything. Yeah. Spelling and arithmetic and language and history and geography and penmanship.
What was your favorite?
Oh, I don't know. I always thought I could spell good. I won 1st prize in the county spelling bee, I guess they called it. And then I went up to Minneapolis, and I had to spell up there, but I don't think I did too well up there. Now I don't think I spell some of those easy words even, forgetting them. But and then when we were in the 8th grade, we'd have graduation for the whole county. And so after Mother died, the girls kind of needed to be home helping our grandmother. And so they stay out a year between 8th grade and high school. I think Florence was the first one to do that. And I guess Jim didn't have to stay home, but the rest of us girls did, except for Steve.
What would you do when you stayed home?
Well, I don't know. We did most everything. I remember wash clothes and ironed them and cleaned the house, dusted. Never cared much for that. And we also sold milk to the town of Ihlen, so we had to wash the bottles and the separator, the cans, and all that stuff, and then fill the bottles and deliver the milk. And so if the roads were real muddy or if we had a lot of snow, I would take a little, we called it a little covered wagon, milk wagon, with horse drawn, and deliver the milk. And I did, the year I stayed out of school, I chopped wood and I helped Dad clean up the barn and things like that. But I never helped milk because my chores was filling the bottles and delivering the milk. And one night Jim and I went over to deliver milk, and we'd stop at the store because our cousin Lucille was running the store and visit with her. And one night when she was going to close up the store, and here Jim wasn't around to drive the car, and I didn't have any place to go, so I started up the car and drove home. And I'd never driven before, and it was kind of moonlight, so I forgot to turn on the lights. I made it home, and I went upstairs to my dad and sat down on the bed and started crying. He said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I drove the car home." And he said, "Well, you got here, didn't you?" So after that way, he let me drive the car to deliver milk and stuff, and that's the way I learned.
What were summers like in Ihlen?
Oh, a lot of the kids went swimming because they had a dam there. And I think they got their electricity from the water. And so we weren't supposed to go swimming because none of us knew how to swim. And there were holes, in the creek and everything. So we never got to go swimming. But one night the kids talked my sister May into going swimming, and she almost drowned. And so we didn't ever try it again.
Did she get in trouble?
Well, she and I went home and we sat outside so her hair got dry. And I don't know if Dad ever found out or not, but we were afraid of water ever after that. So we just stayed away from there.
Now I understand that in wintertime they would do a lot of skating.
Oh, yes. They boarded up on the side of the bridge, one side, and then they put planks so we could sit on them to put our skates on. But we didn't have these fancy skates that were on shoes. We had some that just clamped on the soles of your shoes. And my brother had a pair of the fancy ones, and so I got to wear them once in a while, even if they were boy skates. But he was the only one that had skates on the shoes. And they'd go skating, men and women, and everybody be skating like everything at night. And that was and then there was a little island in the middle of the stream there. And so they'd have some light on there and go skate around it and everything. And sometimes we'd see somebody turn down off from the highway and come down, and we were afraid that they wanted to take us out on a date. So we'd skate way down so they couldn't find us.
What? You want to go meet them?
No, we were trying to avoid them because we loved skating. So we did a lot of skating.
What did children or teenagers do for entertainment in Ihlen?
We used to have movies on the side of the pool hall. they'd have a screen up there, and people would, the grown-ups would sit in cars and the kids would sit in the front on blankets, and we'd have popcorn, maybe sometimes pop, and sit and watch the movies.
Wasn't there
10
also,
cents for,
that's not bad.
no.
Wasn't there also a local theater group?
Oh yes, we had several plays. My cousin that was in the grocery store, she, was of college age, but she didn't go to college then unless, mostly men, boys. But we had the screen up on the side of the pool hall, and the cars would park. No, I was told that before, didn't I? Park there.
I don't remember. Keep talking.
And we'd sit and watch the movies there. Mm-hmm. And then we also had plays. And my cousin Lucille was a director. She worked in the store, and she'd come over and direct us and everything. And we had two carpenters in town, and they were very good at making things. So they'd make sections that have doors or windows in and all that, so we could change it around and have different rooms and stuff. And we'd put on plays. And we never charged admission, but they'd pass the hat, and we'd get our money that way. And I don't know, I got in on a lot of those plays. And I remember one night I was in a play, and the man was an elevator operator, and was supposed to give me a kiss at the end. And the other guys didn't roll down the curtain, they just stood there. They took the longest time to get going again.
So you were practicing on screen?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Cool. All right, so we've covered that. So you did the kind of an opera on the farm long before it was in vogue here in the 1900s?
Oh, yes.
That's great.
Uh-huh.
All right. Now, what kind of chores did you do as a child when you were growing up?
Oh, we, of course, helped feed the cattle, bring them in, and so they had to have feed while they were milking them. We sold milk to the town of Ihlen, and so we had a little house where we brought the milk over there and would run it through a cooler that was full of water, and then the milk would run down the side of it to cool off, and we filled our bottles by hand and take it over to town to deliver milk. And we delivered milk twice a day because a lot of the people didn't have ice boxes to keep it in. And so we'd do it twice a day, and we'd get our ice. There'd be a man from Jasper that would put up ice for winter for, I guess maybe it was for some of the stores and stuff like that. And that's where you'd get the ice from. And so we had a large ice box towards the end, and it would hold a lot of milk. But we'd have to separate it too, get the milk, and then we'd run it through a separator and get the cream off from it. And we'd sell milk for 8 cents a quart, and half a pint of whipping cream would cost 8 cents too. And so then we'd get a pint within 15 cents, so we made a penny on that. But we'd go to town and deliver milk bottles all the way around.
Now, did your father pay you for this, or was this part of your chores?
Or back then you just didn't get, you know, if you needed something, he'd try to buy it for you, but if it was unnecessary, well, you maybe didn't get it.
I hear there's an interesting story about how you learned to drive.
Oh, yeah. Well, we went to town and we were delivering milk, and I'd go in the store because my cousin worked in a grocery store. Her dad owned it. Well, it was more in the grocery store. They had overalls and shirts and underwear and everything like that, but they didn't have suits and dresses, I don't think. But we'd go in there and sit and visit with my cousin, and after we got through delivering milk. And one night, my brother didn't come back, and he didn't come back, and I thought it was time to go home, and they closed up the store about 10 o'clock. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, so I just cranked the car and drove home. And I'd never driven before, but it was kind of moonlight, so I could see where I was going. I didn't turn the lights on. And I got down to the house, and I went up to my dad's room and woke him up, and I said, I drove the car home, and I started crying. And he says, well, you got here, didn't you? And I said, yes. So the next morning he said I could go and deliver milk in town.
Now, I remember when I was younger, you told me you were part of a bank robbery.
Oh.
Were you a participant or a witness, or?
No, I was in town, and I walked down Main Street, and I walked down to the south end of it, and turned, and I was going to go and walk along the sidewalk, and our fence was about a block away, or half a block away, and I was right by the church on the outside, across the street from the church, and a car stopped, and two guys got out of the back seat. They closed the door, and they walked up the alley, and the other two guys sat in the car, and they went to the rest of the block, and then they turned and went up that way, and I'd gotten over the fence to go on through the pasture home, and I heard a shot, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're robbing the bank again. They had robbed shortly before that too. And so I was going to run home and tell my dad and grandma and my sister so they could go and see how it turned out, and nobody was home. So I went back to town, and here they were sitting just across the street from the bank, and they saw the whole thing, and I missed out seeing anything about it. And they, one of the robbers shot one of the tellers in the bank and pushed him out the back door. And my sister saw that. They were sitting right across the street there. And he got shot and had to go to the hospital, but he recovered. And then my uncle was one of the main ones in the bag. And they took him, he was an elderly man. They took him and put him on the running board of the car, and he took another one or two guys on the outside of the car, and then they drove off and went west of Ihlen on the road. And then they threw tacks and stuff in the road, so if anybody chased them, why, they'd have a flat tire. And I think they eventually got caught and were jailed, but it took a long time.
That's a great story. So, as you got older, you got to high school. It's time to start dating. What was dating like? back in the...
Well, you'd go to a movie or something, and that's about it. You never wouldn't think of going to Sioux Falls or anything. We'd just see the movies at Pipestone. And maybe be 4 of us together, and a couple girls and a couple boys. And we had, for some reason or other, it seemed like the Jasper boys, they'd come up almost more than the Pipestone. That was farther away. And we'd really have fun. We'd sing and make a lot of noise, and maybe my husband Louis' cousin had a Ford, and it didn't have much gumption, so most of us would get it out and push it up over the hill, and then we'd run and catch it and go down the hill, and we just did stupid things like that.
Not much has changed.
No.
No. Tell me about meeting Louis.
Well, I met him and went out with him once, and I thought, oh, he's older than me. And so he asked me for another date, and I turned him down. And then my sister married his cousin, Harry Brockberg, and they wanted us to be with them when they got married as their attendants. So we didn't have a mother for wedding, to put on or anything. My sister was working up in Minneapolis, and she was married up there. And so we went up there and stayed with her husband's family in the house, and so Harry and May were married there. And then I guess Louis and I thought we were a little bit older, and we started going. Mm-hmm.
And then one thing led to another, and
got married.
Yeah. And
And I wanted to wait till I was graduated from high school, and I graduated in the end of May, and then we were married the 1st of July. And neither one of us had a mother, so my grandma and my sister made the wedding dinner for us. And it was just Louis' brother, Richard, was his attendant, and Jeanette Nygaard was mine. She was a friend. And so that was all. Our dads went with us to get married, and we were going to get, we never thought of having a church wedding because neither one of us had a mother. So we asked the minister to marry us, and he had a wedding down in his church at Sherman. He was pastor of 2 or 3 different churches. So he said if we came down there, and we could get married in his house. So we did. And then we went back up to our home and had chicken dinner. And it was just us and our attendants and our 2 dads. But Les went along.
now, I was told once you were a cook for threshers.
Yes.
How did that work?
Well, I had never made a pie, and I don't know how much. I could bake a little bit, but Grandma, of course, did most of the cooking and the baking. And so I got my cousin, Louis' cousin, down. She lived in Jasper, and she came out to help me cook for threshers. And so she was a couple of years younger than me, but her mother could make the best pies. So we got a pie together, and we bought a can of young berries or something. I'd never heard of them before. And we put it in the pie shell, and I said, oh, that isn't enough, because I knew apple pie, if we had to put it twice as high, and then they'd cook down. So we went to town and got another can too and put that in there. And it was crazy. Those poor threshers had to eat what we put in front of them.
Well, threshers is an old term. Can you tell my generation what a thresher is?
Well, you'd cut the grain, and it would be tied in bundles. The machinery you used would tie it in bundles, and then you'd have to take those and set 6 or 8 of them together in a group, and they'd sit there until they were all ripe and ready to thresh, and then they'd come with the threshing machine, and all the men would come with their big hay racks and fill it up with these bundles and take it to the threshing rig, and they'd put one on each side and through it, and then it would hull the oats and stuff.
Sure.
And the oats would go in one wagon, and the straw would be blown out in a pile, and that was kind of entertaining. And the thresher would come and just chug, 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 make noise, and we could hear about a mile or more from home. And so we'd kind of rush up to the top of the hill and watch it coming down the road.
Huh. So let's go through the children. What do you remember about little baby Jim?
Well, he was our first baby, and he was pretty good and pretty special. And my sister and Harry had a girl born shortly after them, so they were always together. We went up to May and Harry's a lot. I think we went up there more than they came down to our place. And but the kids really played together, had a lot of fun. And then sometimes we'd leave all of our kids with Grandpa Wilson while we went to a movie or something.
Now, as a child, you discovered that Jim had hay fever?
Yep. I went up to Minneapolis with him to see my sisters up there. I went up with my brother and his wife, and on the way up there, we could tell that there was something wrong with him. We'd go a certain way in, and he'd be coughing and sneezing and everything. So we found out he had hay fever and asthma, and we came home, and for a long time, he'd have to go up to the doctor to get shots. And he was just a little fellow, and I wasn't dressed, and I had Kay in the car and everything. And he'd go over to the doctor was up above the bank, and he'd stand by that door a little minute, and somebody'd come and open the door for him, and up he'd go.
Tell me about baby Kay.
Oh, she was a little sweetheart. She was tiny. And Jim was out going to take lunch out to his dad in the field, and he didn't come back. When he came back, we were wondering where Kay was. And everybody started looking for her, and they were calling her and everything. And Louis came in from the field, and first thing he did, go down to the tank and see if she'd fallen in. And we finally found her. I had been in the house, but I just hadn't looked around. And I thought, well, she must be outside because they were calling her. And here I went in through the dining room and living room and into the little toy room, and she was sitting in a chair rocking her doll. and we'd just been looking for the longest time. So, and she was real small, but she was fun to have. She was a good baby. They were all good. And then when Jim had to have his tonsils out, and she had such earache. So her dad would lay her on her stomach, and he'd lay there and rub her ears like that. And so the doctor said, well, he thought that they'd have to do surgery. And so Jim needed surgery too. They thought that he'd help his hay fever. So he had surgery first, and then she had it, and she couldn't take the anesthetic, and she died. And we didn't know how we were going to tell her, and Louis said, well, your dad's the one that he'll have to tell her. So we stopped down there, and my aunt was there too that summer. She came spend most of her summers with us. She was teaching first grade in Dallas, Texas. And she'd come up and stay with us in the summertime. And so they took Jim in the house and told him. And that was real hard to lose her.
How did Louis take it?
It was hard for him. His mother always wanted a girl. I think she had, the first child was a girl, and I don't know if she was stillborn or, but then they had 5 boys. And of course my family had 5 girls and 1 boy. And so we got together. And
tell me about baby Barb.
Barb, she was a sweetheart too. She and Jean, I remember they had some winter coats, and people would stop them on the street and comment on how nice they looked and everything. And she was real good, and she ended up doing cooking and baking, and she was always kind of fussy about doing things right. So, and she went up to college, and I think it was, I was up there quite often. I quit working about that time. And so I'd go up there and stay with Carrie, and then they could do something. And so I was with her one day, and I think Ron and Carrie, Barb went up north or someplace. And so that was the first time that Carrie hadn't gone with them and everything. And so she got along pretty good, and I kept on going up there every once in a while. And I think the year Barb died, I'd been up there every month for something. And just a few days before, I went with her to the doctor because she is having headaches all the time. And I went with her to the doctor so I could watch Carrie. And so I got home, and just home for a few days, and they called and said that Barb had passed away. And so I was just so happy that I'd been up there that much that year.
Tell me about baby Bruce.
Baby Bruce, he was kind of a toughie. He could do more things than Jim because of Jim's hay fever and everything. And but he got along pretty good. And of course, Jim couldn't do a lot of stuff outside with chores. But Bruce used to go to his uncle, no, his dad's cousin, and he asked him to come and help bale hay, and the hay bales are pretty heavy, and so Bruce would ask him, they'd want to get two to be on the wagon to take the bales, and he said, asked him if he did it all alone, if he could get more money for it. And so he'd do it for two. Now he's been suffering with a bad back ever since. But he just thought that could make more money that way. One was in the hospital. Who was that?
I think Bruce was in the hospital.
Yes, he was in the hospital.
No blockage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't go in to see him. He was down in Sioux Falls. And we couldn't go down to see him because they didn't want him to cry. And so we'd stand and look at him through the window. And if he looked like he was going to turn his head that way, we would duck down. And that was rough. And then the day he was going to come home, the doctor said, well, he could go home that day. And he started crying, and he cried. And Louie and I thought we couldn't get him till afternoon, so we were downtown walking the street. Went out there, and they said, oh boy, are we glad to see you. He'd been crying ever since the doctor told him that he could go home.
Last but not least, baby Jean.
Baby Jean. Yeah. Well, he was all my kids were good. We were pretty fortunate to have them. So.
Now I understand Barb used to help teach Jean.
Oh yeah, yeah. She was a teacher from right early on.
What'd she help teach him?
Oh, how to talk. What was it he used to say? Peace, Mom. Can I have? What was it he said?
So he used to have A and I screwed up.
Oh yeah, A. Yes, we'd say A, and he'd say I, and we'd say A, and he'd say I. He'd just keep on. He had a hard time getting him to talk, but he's been talking ever since.
We've been listening for the last 32 minutes to trains going by. Now, trains have been a big part of the farmland here in Minnesota and the South Dakota border. You grew up with trains over in Ihlen. Can you tell me a little about the train depot there?
Oh, yes. They had trains there. They had for, they called it the roundhouse, and they'd come bring their trains in to get service there, charged up, go through them. And so they had a lot of men would work, and then they'd have one of their trains, what do you call it, where they'd sleep.
A sleeping car.
Sleeping car, and then they'd have a place where they could eat, one car for eating and everything. And they'd come and get their trains, the engines worked on so they could go and pull out again. And they called it the bridge crew. And they'd have one car where they'd make the meals, and they had good meals. And Ihlen had a restaurant down right by the railroad tracks. And so then they'd stop and have their meal there too, lots of times. And they really, it was a good place. A lot of men around. And they had 3 grain elevators in Ihlen where the farmers could bring their grain. And so it was very good that way. And then they had what you call a beanery. and that's where they could get cooked meals too.
Now, as a young child, did you ever hop on the trains, or?
Oh yes, you could go to Jasper at night for 10 cents, go down at 6 o'clock at night, and go to a movie for 10 cents, and then you could go on the train back to Ihlen about 10 o'clock at night. And so that was your entertainment.